Well, good morning. It's good to be together this morning, and we want to welcome certainly everybody that's joining us online. Today is a good day. It's a day that I'm excited for two reasons. One is the church app. I get excited about little things. I'm really excited that the church app is finally here. I need things in life to be really simple for me. So you go to your app store, go to WC Church, you download that app. You want to sign up for Christmas? Literally, it's just right there. Boop. You just sign up for Christmas, however many tickets you need, there you go. If you want to sign up, we have a Connect class literally going on right now. So a Connect class is designed for people that may be a little bit new to our church, whether they're new to us online, they're new to us in person. They can come to the Connect class, hear a little bit more about the church. Really, what is the church all about? What does the church believe? What's the vision of the church? That's going on right now. The next class will come up here in the next few months or whatever. You want to sign up for that? You see it on the app? Boop, there it is. You want to give? The Thanksgiving offering is going on right now. We're getting ready to conclude that. I have some exciting news to share on that. Thanksgiving offering, our goal was $100,000 to give $50,000 to our church camp, Round Lake Church Camp, up in Belleville, Ohio, up north, just a little bit north of Mansfield there, and then also to have $50,000 to adjust some things in our children's ministry. To date, we have given $82,000 to that, so we got $18,000 more to go, and that's awesome, above and beyond our giving. But if you want to give to that, download the app. There's a giving section right there. Boop, you do it, and it goes from there. And when you do it, it actually does make that sound. We made sure that was a feature. It probably doesn't, but maybe if you have your ringer on it, we'll go from there. But we're excited about that. But I'm really excited to begin to celebrate Christmas. Celebrate Christmas. You see, just like Thanksgiving a few weeks ago, you had to be intentional about celebrating Thanksgiving a few weeks ago. In the midst of everything that's been going on in your life and my life, in the life of the world, and all these different adjustments that we've had to make, you have to be intentional about being thankful for those things. We call it this, that my attitude may be that of gratitude. Well, Christmas is the same thing. You have to intentionally celebrate Christmas this year, to celebrate it, not just go through it, not just go through the motions and say, okay, here we go, how are we going to have to do this? But you celebrate Christmas. I'm excited to do that. You know, if you've been with us for the last, couple weeks, several weeks or whatever, we concluded a series last week that we simply entitled A Series of Unfortunate Events. It was a study in the Old Testament book of 1st and 2nd Samuel. We looked at who I believe to be the second most influential person in the Old Testament. That's King David. The first most influential person in the Old Testament is, any guesses? Abraham. I think it's Father Abraham. Because our covenant relationship that comes through faith, our covenant relationship with God comes through faith. Well, Abraham's the first example of that. He sets forth what it means to believe in God, to have faith in what God is doing, and it's credited to him as righteousness. His faith puts him in a right relationship with God, not because of what he has done, but because of what God has done for us. But Abraham didn't know about Christmas. David didn't know about Christmas. Now, I think they knew some about it, but we know the events, not the story of Christmas. And so we're going to celebrate Christmas by jumping into a series today called The Son of David. The Son of David. If you have a Bible with you this morning, let's go about 3/4 through the Bible, about almost 80% through the Bible, and go to the very first book of the New Testament. It's called the Gospel of Matthew. Go to the first book, Matthew, chapter 1, and let's look at verse 1. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. Matthew is the tax collector who will come to be known as one of the 12 disciples of Jesus. And Matthew writes his gospel to prove to a Jewish audience that Jesus is indeed what he is going to refer to as the Christ or Messiah. Let's pick it up. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. It says a record. This is literally how the New Testament starts. A record of the genealogy, the lineage of Jesus. Now, this word Christ is interesting. It's not Jesus' last name. Christ is not Jesus' last name. When Jesus was in second grade, they didn't say, Christ, Jesus, are you present? No, it's just, this is a messianic, a Messiah title given to Jesus. The Greek word, the Gospel of Matthew, all the New Testament is written in Greek. The Greek word for Christ is Christos. Christos. Therefore, an understanding of that, that's the Greek, but a Hebrew understanding of that, if a Jewish person read that word, they would immediately connect that to Messiah. Messiah. So what Matthew's doing here is he says Jesus is the Messiah. He's the long-awaited Messiah. And we're going to prove that. Why? By showing that he is the son of David. Because the Messiah prophecies of the Old Testament say that there is one who will come in the line of David to rule and shepherd people. We'll look at that here in a minute. But this is all related to, yes, the pinnacle moment for God's chosen people, the nation of Israel in the Old Testament. God's chosen people are the people who choose to have faith in what God is up to. And for us, that comes through faith in Jesus. But he's going to show this. It comes in the line of David. Now let's flip over just one chapter to chapter 2. In Matthew chapter 2, let's talk about this son of David thing real quick. This is all going to start when we look at, through this series, we're going to look at, okay, how does King David, the one whom we studied for 12 weeks, how does King David connect to the Messiah, the Son of God? How does he connect to Jesus? And the reason we're going to do this is because it really is going to show God's sovereignty in all this. Jesus wasn't God's plan B. Jesus was God's plan A, and it had been all the way since before Genesis, since before creation. Well, how does King David connect to Jesus? Well, it all starts in this little town known as, anybody have a guess? Bethlehem. This little town of Bethlehem. So let's pick it up. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1, Matthew tells us this. He says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem, small little shepherding town, just a little bit outside of Jerusalem, maybe 6 or 7 miles, in Judea. Now, this is interesting because this is also Greek translation. The Hebrew understanding of this word Judea would be Judah. Why? Because Judah is one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Go all the way back to the book of Genesis. And guess who was born of the tribe of Judah? King David. Then guess who needs to be born in the tribe of Judah? Well, that would be the Messiah, which we come to know as Jesus. So he says, during the time of King Herod, we'll talk about King Herod here in a minute, just spoiler alert, he's not a nice guy. Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, and they asked, this is what they asked, where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? Question number one, how in the world do these Magi from the east know that there was a king of the Jews to be born? Talk about that in a minute. We saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. Think about this for a minute. You see, a lot of times when we get into the Christmas season and the celebration of Christmas, we just kind of go through here. You expected to come to church today. When you jumped online and said, hey, we're going to go to church online. We're sitting in our living room. We're going to be saved. We're going to do all this kind of stuff. Well, you expected to hear something about Jesus, didn't you? You expected to hear something about Christmas. You expected us, if you're really church, to go either into the Gospel of Matthew, but we threw you a trick. You thought we were going to go in the Gospel of Luke, and instead we went in the Gospel of Matthew. You know some things about the Christmas events. When we stop and slow down and think about this, we have to ask important questions. Like one, how in the world do these Magi even know of this? Our focus today will be on Bethlehem. Let's take just a small little pause. What's the deal with these Magi, and where are they even coming from? Now, some of us have favorite Christmas songs, right? You know, my wife has some favorite Christmas songs that I loathe. They're terrible. My wife loves Mariah Carey Christmas. Guess what I hate? Mariah Carey Christmas. And so last year, literally, my wife is playing music, Christmas music, all the time. How many of you are now listening to Christmas music? Yeah, it's okay to admit it. I got a guy, macho guy in the back, and he's like, no, do I admit this? Yes, you can admit it, just as long as it's not Mariah Carey. So it's last year, my wife always is listening to poppy Christmas music. And so I got on my Spotify account, and I said, I'm going to make a man's Christmas list. Like, this is a man's Christmas song list. And so I have Johnny Cash. It's a story. Johnny Cash Christmas, Elvis Christmas, Trans-Siberian Orchestra, a great band by the name of Shane and Shane. I mean, it's like a man's Christmas list. But I love Christmas songs. But one of my favorite Christmas songs is actually completely and entirely biblically inaccurate. And it's an old song called We Three Kings. Guess what? No such thing. There's no such thing. The Magi aren't kings. They're not of royalty. They're thought to have been astrologers who practiced divination. This is why God reveals through his creation a star that a Messiah has been born. The King of the Jews have been born. We Three Kings actually don't exist. Now, it kind of ruins the song, but it's still a good song, right? Well, how did they even know that the King of the Jews had been born? Well, I think this maybe could relate to the Old Testament prophecies and the Old Testament person of David, or of Daniel. Think the Old Testament book of Daniel. Think Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace. You see, the Magi are most likely Persian. They're from the Persian Empire, which conquered God's people about 400 years after the time of David. after the time of David, King David. And so this prophecy of a Messiah that was going to restore God's people and God's kingdom might have come and been a tradition within the Persian Empire, that this is a tradition of the Jewish people. So the Magi, they come to worship the king who has been born. Look at verse 3. It says, when King Herod heard this from the Magi, he was disturbed. We'll talk about this in a minute, why Herod was disturbed. And all Jerusalem with him. When he had called together all the people's chief priests and the teachers of the law, the experts in the law, those who knew the Old Testament, King Herod asked them where the Christ, the Messiah, was to be born. Look what he says. Verse 5, in Bethlehem, in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. Now, this prophet is the Old Testament prophet Micah. Micah chapter 5, verse 2. You can literally look it up in your Bible, and it will say this. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of, here it is, Judah, one of the 12 tribes of Israel, the tribe known as the tribe of David, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. Why? For out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people Israel. Now, Micah's prophecy also takes place about 400 years after the reign of King David and over 600 years before the birth of Jesus. So the Old Testament prophet, the minor prophet Micah, is obviously not talking about King David. He is talking about a future Messiah that we will know as Jesus. What's Matthew's point? Matthew's point, Matthew, the tax collector that walks away from his tax collecting booth to follow Jesus, one of the 12 disciples. He's writing this gospel to prove to his Jewish brothers and sisters, hey, stop waiting for the Messiah. He has come. His name is Jesus. Let me prove it to you. Where's the Messiah to be born? The teachers of the law, the experts in the law, the chief priests, they say it. He's to be born in Bethlehem. Where's Jesus born? Guess what? In Bethlehem. Look what happens, verse 7. It says this, then Herod called the Magi secretly. That's how Herod worked. He works in secret. And found out from them the exact time the star had appeared. Now notice this. It's starting to show us something. When did the star appear? Well, what Herod is asking the Magi, hey, when did you first see this star? Well, they didn't see it in Jerusalem. They saw it back east. And then they journeyed towards the star. So when did you see this star? See, I love nativity scenes. I do, especially nowadays. And the whole idea of cancel culture and the whole idea of really what is seemed to be in our culture, a post-Christian culture, I love seeing nativity scenes. Here's the problem with nativity scenes. They're not all that biblically accurate, but I still want to see them. I want to see them on the town square. If you were with us in our Revelation series, and our friend Dr. Shane Wood, he talked about in his nativity scene from the book of Revelation, he's got this red dragon that hangs out in his nativity scene. And he's like, it kind of scares my kids, but it's more biblically accurate that way. Here's one of the things with the Magi. The Magi shouldn't be at the nativity scene unless Jesus is no longer in a stable, unless he's no longer in a manger. And we're going to see this here. This is taking place maybe a year or even two after Jesus was born. And so I remember Addie used to set up a nativity scene. We used to live in Michigan for 4 years. It was a dark 4 years. But we lived there for 4 years. And Addie, when we first got married, she set up this nativity scene. And I would immediately go up to the nativity scene, and I would just steal the three kings, the three Magi, and I would hide them somewhere. She's like, why do you do that all the time? I was like, because this is a biblically accurate house. We live in a biblically accurate house. And I would mess with her all the time. But look at what happened. What time did the star appear? When did the star appear? Look at what happens in verse 8. He sent them to Bethlehem. Hey, I heard this guy's going to be born in Bethlehem. And said, go and make careful search. Do my work for me. Make a careful search for the child. Look at what he's going to say. As soon as you find him, well, report that back to me. Oh, Bethlehem's only 6 or 7 miles from Jerusalem anyways. Report that back. Send somebody, to walk 7 miles or so, come back and let me know. So that I too may go and worship him. Worship him. A little bit about Herod. Herod has no intentions to worship Jesus. No intentions to worship the king that is supposedly to be born in Bethlehem or has already been born in Bethlehem. Herod is a tyrant. That's what he is. Look up history on Herod. It's actually fascinating. If you love history, do a little bit of history research on King Herod. King Herod was really placed as king of the Jews. He was made king of the Jews in 40 BC under the direct authority of the Roman Senate. He's a product of Rome. Rome has given him his power. And so Herod has two goals in life. One, to appease Rome. Remember, the Jewish people are a conquered people yet again. Conquered by the Assyrians, the Persians, Babylonian, all that, some 600 years prior to this, freed, allowed to go back to the promised land, and then again conquered by the Romans. They're conquered people at this time. And so they have their guy, Herod the Great, as king of the Jews so that they will do exactly what they want them to do. Pay their taxes, do all that. Goal number one for Herod, appease Rome. Goal number two, stay on the throne as long as he possibly can. Even to the point where he's killed one of his wives and he's killed one of his sons who had threatened him for the throne. So when Herod hears of this prophecy, he said, okay, we got to find him. If this is true, what are these guys doing coming all the way from the east? Obviously something's going on. We got to find him. You find him, you tell me where he is so that I may worship him. Okay, sound good. Yeah, that's not his intent. You see, from a political perspective, when you look up the history of King Herod, he is a phenomenal politician. His building campaigns, you can go to the Holy Land now, see remnants of his palace. His fortified city of Masada, Google this sometime. Google Masada. His fortified city of Masada is phenomenal. From a political perspective, Herod is the man. But from a spiritual perspective, he's evil. This boy's straight evil, and he's going to show it. Look at verse 9. It says this. After they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star, I think this is so cool, the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. So these three magi, these astrologers, are literally following this bright star. What are they doing? They are following God's creation, and God's creation is leading them to do what? To worship Jesus. Think about that. We can't miss the connection here. God uses his creation to help us worship Jesus all the time. Now, I know some of us are a little bit crunchier than others. We're a little bit more outdoorsy. But I love when God does this for me. I love when I have time just to be outside. The other day when it was just this beautiful snow, and I don't know, maybe you're setting up your Christmas tree or something, you could look out your window and you see the snow fall, and all of a sudden you have a front yard or you have a backyard or whatever it is, and you see the snow and the Christmas, wasn't it perfect? I'm like, man, I wish Christmas Eve would look exactly like it did a couple days ago. Creation, God's creation, points us to worship Jesus. It does this all the time. It's just the thing is, we got to take a step back and slow down to be able to see it. I love the way the Apostle Paul illustrates this for us in the New Testament letter to the church in Rome. In Romans chapter 1, verse 20, Paul says this. He says, for since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen. They've been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. God didn't make the earth for himself. He made the world for us to enjoy and for us to take care of. Why? So that men and women, you don't get an excuse from this one, so that men and women are without excuse. How is God using his creation to point you to worship Jesus? How is he using your creation? I'm telling you, he will, time and time again. This is what he's doing with the Magi. Verse 10, let's go to verse 10 of Matthew chapter 2. Back to Matthew 2. It says, when they saw the star, God's creation, they were overjoyed. They had joy in the midst of God's creation. On coming to the house, notice it's not a manger, notice it's not a stable, it's after the birth of Jesus. They saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down, and what'd they do? They worshiped him. They worshiped him. Go on. Then they opened their treasure and presented him with gifts of gold, gift number 1, of incense, gift number 2, and of myrrh, gift number 3. You see, here's the point of today's entire message. At the first Christmas, Jesus got 3 gifts. Therefore, your kids should only get 3 gifts this Christmas. I'm just kidding. Our online attendance just plummeted. There were literally kids in the living room that just got up and turned off the TV. We're like, I knew this guy. This guy was fallacy. He speaks malice. That's not the point of the message. I used to tell Addie this all the time, like our kids should get 3 gifts because Jesus only got 3 gifts. Actually, they should get 2 because they're not as good as Jesus. And she'd say, get out of here with that stuff. Verse 12, here's the point. Here's the real point of today's message. And having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, the Magi returned to their country by another route. Here's the point. Even when it seems like God is not in control, guess what? God is still in control. Even when it seems like God is not in control in your life, God is still in control. And I know that's extremely difficult. I have really struggled to remain faithful to that eternal truth over the last couple months. I cannot tell you how many times I've just kind of looked up in the sky and said, really? Come on, man. Like, really? Really? Are you still in control? I mean, I believe that you're still in control. But you know when I really struggle to have faith that God is in control? Even though I know God's in control, I struggle when one of three things happen in my life. One, something happens that I don't want to happen. I don't want it to happen. It happened, I didn't want it to happen, and now that it's happened, I think to God, God, why has this happened? Two, when something happens in my life, and I can't figure out why God ever allowed it to happen in my life. Why did you allow this to happen? Or three, something happens, and I don't even know where it ever even began. I cannot track down the root of why something happened. I get lost in this God is sovereign, God is in control, God is love. I get lost in all this stuff. Am I the only one? I mean, am I the only one that there's been times in life, and there's been multiple times this year that said, really, God? Really? What's your purpose in this? You know, I am adverse to suffering, completely adverse to it. There's never a day in my life that I would sign up to say, hey, there's a free suffering buffet down the street. Oh, I'll sign up. No, I'm adverse to suffering. But in the midst of suffering, there are times that I see things that I would have never seen unless I suffered. This year, I had seen something that really I never paid attention to in the Christmas events. And that's this. The world was a mess when Jesus was born. It was a mess when Jesus was crucified. It was a mess when Jesus resurrected. It was a mess when Jesus ascended back into heaven. And I'm pretty convinced it will be a mess when Jesus comes back. The world's a mess. I know that seems a bit pessimistic. You know, I have to be honest with you this morning. I really do. This is vulnerable, but I just have to share this. I'm struggling. I'm struggling. I'm tired of this. I am so tired of this. I looked at my wife, Addie, the other day, and I said, Addie, I got about a quarter of a tank of gas left. That's all I got. I said, I got a quarter of a tank. I'm so tired of living and leading through this COVID reality in 2020 and this and that. I'm just tired of it. I don't have much left at all. As far as I can tell, I got a quarter of a tank left, which is going to get me to about March 1st or year anniversary, March 15th, and then I don't have anything left. I said, I have no idea where it's going to come from. And she just kind of looked at me, and she gave me that face where she's like, I'm here. I'm listening if you want to say. I said, I don't have all the answers. I said, I don't have all the answers. I don't know what we need to do over here. I don't know what we need to do over here. I don't know what we should do over here. I can't figure out 5th grade math. I'm like, I don't have the answers. I'm just struggling. And she kind of looked at me and gave me that face like, don't you believe that God is in control? So I looked at her and I said, don't you dare preach to me. I'm the preacher in the family. You know, but it was so true. God is in control, even when it seems like he's not. God's purpose will prevail. God will prove faithful every time. All he asks of me is just to simply trust. Trust. You know, I think of this song that is older than I am, that I remember singing since the very first Christmas that I can remember in my grandmother's little Presbyterian church. And it was the song, Little Town of Bethlehem. That it all started in this little town. God's prophecy that he spoke through his faithful followers from years before. The mess that Jesus was born in. the humility that Jesus was born, the way that he was born, the humility in the way he was going to live his life, the humility in the way that he was going to live his life, the humility in the way that he was going to invite me into an eternal relationship with him. And every time I hear that song, O Little Town of Bethlehem, I think of the opening lyrics that just simply say, how still we see thee lie. Think about this. The everlasting God, God in the flesh, decides to lie in a manger as a vulnerable baby. Wow. It says, above the deep and dreamless sleep, the silent star goes by, creation speaking to humanity. Yet in the dark streets shine. I look at that and I say, my streets are dark at times, but yet Jesus is still shining. The everlasting, the forever light, the hopes and fears. I never thought of this verse like this phrase in here. The hopes and fears of all the years, even this year, of all the years, are met in thee tonight. Are met in thee tonight. You know what I love? Why I love Christmas? Because it reminds me that only with Jesus can there be peace on earth. That only with Jesus can there be peace on earth. And that began as God in the flesh in this little town called Bethlehem. What an imperfect yet perfect place for God to intersect into the story of humanity. In no other way like that. The greatest gift ever given to us. The humble Christ child, Jesus, the Messiah. Would you pray with me? Lord, thank you. Thank you that in your infinite wisdom and mercy in the midst of our struggle, in the midst of our lack of peace in certain ways, that, Lord, you remind us that only with Jesus can there be peace on earth. And that started on this side, the temporary side of eternity. It started in a little town of Bethlehem. And in the chaos of today or the chaos of the world, just like it was chaotic when you came into the physical presence of the world, Lord, we're thankful for your sovereignty. We're thankful that you are in control. And at times that we lack faith in that, we simply ask for your help. It's in Christ's name we pray these things. Amen.